So when I say this, I really mean it. This is probably going to be one of the biggest videos I've ever made for this channel. Now, there is so much to cover today. In the last 48 hours, we have had so much happen within the Canadian political realm. And today I start off really quickly with some new poll numbers. So these are the newest poll numbers that we have available to us. It's from the CBC, so they aggregated this number. And for the first time, this is what it reads, for the first time in nearly 3 years, the Liberals are leading in the polls as support for the Conservatives and NDP slides. So the Liberals would have a roughly 3 in 4 chance of winning the most seats if an election were held today, while the odds that Mark Carney would secure a majority would be the equivalent of a coin toss. So there's a 50-50 chance that Mark Carney and the Liberals win a majority. Now you may be wondering, this does not really matter. So what is the seat count? Take a look at this. 176 to 133. So CBC for a very long time has had the Liberals below that 172 mark. This is the first time ever since Justin Trudeau's resigned, obviously, but also in the last, I want to say 10 years, that the Liberals have been projected to win a majority. Even in 2019, they weren't projected to win a majority, even in 2021. So it's really crazy. It's really crazy. And then again, 53% chance that the Liberals would win a majority. Really shocking stuff that we're seeing here. But I don't want to dwell too much on this because I think there's some other matters that we have to get to. And the first one I want to talk about is this. So, wait, not this one. Oh, shoot, where is it? Yeah, it's right here. This is the one that I want to talk about. So really quickly, yesterday, President Donald Trump sat down with Laura Ingraham of Fox News. Laura Ingraham is a reporter. She's pretty well known in the American sphere, but basically they sat down for an interview. And so Pierre Poilievre reposted this clip, and he said, last night, President Donald Trump endorsed Mark Carney. Endorsed. That's a very strong statement that he's making. Why? Because as Trump said, he's easier to deal with and knows that I will be a tough negotiator and always put Canada first. Carney is weak and would cave to Trump's demands, just like he did when he moved his company headquarters from Canada to New York City. Canadians don't want a weak and conflicted leader. They want a strong prime minister who will put Canada first. So we're going to watch the clip, and then we're going to talk about what the facts are, because many of the statements that he's made, or many of the words that he used in this statement, are false. Let's watch it first.
Isn't that going to make them more hostile to us and possibly
I'd rather deal with a liberal than a
for
conservative.
China closer to Canada, and that would really put us in a bind.
The conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal actually with a liberal.
Isn't that going to make them more?
So I think the argument that he's trying to make is that, hey, Trump is saying that because, so he said it would be easier to deal with a liberal. He didn't actually endorse a liberal. He didn't say, a liberal would be the one that I want to win. He just said it would be easier to deal with. That is very different from endorsing a leader. But nonetheless, assuming that he did sort of, quote unquote, endorse him, let's look at that argument. So he endorsed him. So what? What's going to happen now? Does Pierre Poilievre genuinely think that because Trump said, hey, yeah, it would be easier to deal with Mark Carney, that would, Canadians will look at that and be like, yeah, no, Pierre Poilievre is the right guy for that? I think it's a weak argument, personally. And then again, he made some statements like, Carney is weak and would cave to Trump's demands, just like he did when he moved his company headquarters from Canada to New York City. Just for the record, Carney did not cave to Trump's demands. He moved to Brookfield. So Brookfield Asset Management moved their headquarters from Toronto to New York prior to the U.S. election. That's number one. Number two, Mark Carney was the chair of the board, but there are other board members. There are many other people who are part of the decision-making process. And he also, most likely, if anybody knows, or if Pierre Poilievre knows anything about business, it's that business decisions don't happen overnight. You don't move your entire headquarters overnight. This was probably something they had in the books for about a few years or a few months or whatever it may have been, but it was well before Trump even could have gone on the phone and said, hey, Brookfield, move your headquarters, because he does not care. I mean, there was not a reason for him to do that, and also the election didn't even happen by then. So that's one thing I want to talk about. The second one, and this is a critique of Mark Carney. There's two, actually, but I'm going to start off with this one. So Pierre Poilievre posted this. He said, Prime Minister Carney said yesterday, Canada cannot trade with the world unless we have a carbon tax. Yet he moved his company headquarters to New York and invests in U.S. coal where there is no carbon tax. He wants Canadians to pay carbon tax that he dodges paying himself. If Carney wins, Canada loses. Okay, so let's watch this clip, and then we'll react to it again. Don't know why it's not loading. Let's reload it. And again, I mean, he's posted this clip. There's another clip that we have from this very meeting or press conference. We're going to show that later.
Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the European Union? Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the United Kingdom? Guess what one of the requirements will be to diversify trade to emerging Asia? Is to have a form of price on carbon. So we are able to think one step ahead. Guess what one of the requirements is?
So he's not completely wrong by that, but at the same token, I think, the carbon tax. Listen, man, I don't know why he's talking about it. Personally, I don't know what the question was that they asked him. I don't know why he's talking about it. I think it's a non-issue at this point. But with that being said, I think most Canadians would agree that the carbon tax should probably get rid of, or we should probably get rid of the carbon tax, just because it's been so divisive. Obviously, he did put the order in council. I'm aware that he did get rid of it for consumers. But I do think the industrial carbon tax, it could be re-explored. That's sort of what I would leave it at. At least for the Liberals, I think they should definitely look at ways that they could re-explore it. However, I did see there was a joint statement or joint letter that was released by many different energy companies in Alberta, all across Canada, but mostly in Alberta. And these are large energy companies, by the way, that do not like the carbon tax or shouldn't like the carbon tax because they're being taxed on it. But they even said that they'd rather, because they want predictability, right? They want stability. Companies don't like it when there's uncertainty. So they said, they sort of said something along the lines of, we're fine with the carbon tax, but just we want it to be, if it stays, it stays. If it gets removed, it gets removed. Not like this flip-flopping and whatnot, which I think is a fair point, obviously. So I think, definitely revisiting the carbon tax on industrial polluters is a valid point that Pierre Poilievre is making, if that is what he's trying to say. I think at the same time, though, again, he says he wants Canadians to pay carbon taxes that he dodges paying himself. I mean, Canadians have pretty much been exempted from the carbon tax thanks to his order in council. So Pierre, again, I don't know why he's harping on this. I don't know why. And this is not me saying, Pierre Poilievre is a stupid guy. I know he's a smart guy. I know he knows how politics works. I think Pierre Poilievre, or whoever his team is, needs to understand you have about 30, maybe 40 days until an election happens, or until election day happens, because Carney's probably going to call it within the next week. Okay, let's say you have 45 days, for argument's sake. You need to pivot your strategy. You are getting killed in all the polls. You are getting killed. Polywave, which is run by a conservative, by the way, has the Liberals winning a majority as well. You are getting killed. 338 Canada has the Liberals winning a majority as well. I mean, these are not minorities. This is not just a chance of victory. This is winning a majority. And when you do things like this, Pierre, to the conservatives, this is not a politically intelligent move. So it says, this is the headline. This is not just the CBC, by the way. There's many other news sources that have corroborated the story. And this is not just me saying this, is the conservatives that have said it. Conservatives won't allow reporters to travel with Poilievre during upcoming election. No recent precedent for a major party barring journalists from accompanying federal campaign. So there is no precedent. There's no reason as to why he would do this. Now, I want to make it clear. The reason why Pierre Poilievre has been losing, there's multiple factors, obviously. One of the biggest ones, though, that I think I haven't seen many people mention, I think I've seen some people mention it, but not enough, is that he has not been getting the airtime that he used to get. Do you guys remember back in December when he was like, when he called out the Governor General, he wrote a letter to the Governor General, he's like, hey, bring back Parliament, we want to get an election, blah, blah, blah. All the media sources, all the news networks were covering it. But the fact of the matter is, in the last few months, in the last 2 to 3 months, or even the last 2 to 3 weeks, if you want to call it, he's been losing that airtime. The main news networks in Canada have not been covering Pierre Poilievre as much as they did before. So what does that do? That'll evidently have a negative impact on your chances of winning an election. So take a look at this. The Conservative National Campaign Director told media outlets Tuesday that their journalists won't be allowed to travel with leader Pierre Poilievre on his campaign plane and bus during the upcoming election, ending a decades-old tradition of reporters embedding with a prospective candidate to lead the country. It's important to note that in 2019, when Andrew Scheer was there in 2021, major broadcasters including CBC, Radio Canada, CBC Radio Canada, CTV, and Global, and a number of print outlets in the wire service, the Canadian Press, had journalists with those candidates throughout the campaign. So what does this mean? So basically, like when you see, I don't know if you ever guys have ever seen those clips where, Justin Trudeau or Andrew Scheer or Aaron O'Toole during their campaign, they would have like people on their bus asking them questions. That's not going to happen anymore. During the plane rides, that's not going to happen anymore. Even when they get and touch down. I don't know how that's going to work exactly when they touch down, if he's going to take any questions. But in general, those are huge moments where people actually watch that. And so what that means is, I think what he's planning is that he's probably going to broadcast on his channel, on his YouTube channel, which, and I guess his X account as well. But I don't think that's a really intelligent move. And again, when you're losing airtime, this is the worst possible decision you could have made. He needs to have airtime to tell Canadians what he's going to do for the country. I mean, he clearly has plans. He clearly has plans. Everybody knows that. But how are you going to project those plans if you're just going to post on your YouTube channel, if you're just going to stream it on your YouTube channel? And who are you going to take questions from? Reporters, whether you like them or not, they do ask serious questions that Canadian people want to know. So that brings me to my next point, which is related to Mark Carney. So this has something to do with his interaction with the reporter recently. So Brian Lilley, who is evidently a conservative, who I still covered, by the way, because I don't discriminate based on which political party they support. But he basically said, wow, exclamation mark. Mark Carney gets very testy when asked about his assets by the Globe and Mail's Stephanie Levitz, and then lectures CBC's Rosemary Barton for following up. Something is up here. And really, lecturing two journalists about their questions? Okay, so let's watch it. 3 minutes long. Okay, it's not loading. Okay, there you go.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitz with Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary. And I will remind you, and I'll remind Canadians again, that the Leader of the Opposition cannot find it. And look, you look at the questions this evening, you look at the nature of the discussions, look at the nature of discussions I had with the President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Leader of the Opposition would not be capable of having those discussions because the Leader of Opposition refuses to get his security clearance, something that it took me a few weeks to get. And he has been the Leader of the Opposition for 3 years. So I comply with my responsibilities, I comply with the rules well in advance, and the Leader of the Opposition doesn't take his responsibilities at a time of, well, you should take these responsibilities at any time, but it's particularly remarkable given the stakes in global geopolitics at the moment.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you've sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Trump spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. That's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
Okay. So a lot of people have been getting angry at this, and they're saying, so he said, lecture CBC Rosemary Barton for following up. I think, if you watch the entire thing again, clearly you could tell he's not used to being a politician, and that's not anything personal against him. It's just he has never been in a political position prior to this. So that's number one. Number two, he hasn't been asked questions by reporters that often, and so this was early on. This is when he met with Macron and Keir Starmer. So this is after that. So this is pretty early on. One of the first times he actually took questions from the media. And so again, I think when it's on a national stage, it's a lot different. Second thing I would say is, he did say, look inside yourself, Rosemary. I don't really know what he was referring to there. I think that could be misconstrued. I don't think he should have said that personally. I think everybody could sort of agree that could have been misconstrued. Whether you think it was or not, it could have been misconstrued. So that's sort of how he dealt with it. I think, he did he answer the question properly? He didn't answer it directly, obviously. I think that's pretty clear. But then again, he was obviously not prepared for it. You could tell, and he didn't want to discuss it. So then again, that does bring up the point. I don't know what's going on completely with the conflict of interest stuff as of right now. As far as I'm aware, he did put his assets in a blind trust. That is the latest that we've been told. Now, they're saying, you have to disclose it publicly. I don't know if that's the rules and the procedures, so I'm not going to comment on that and whether he should do it, because I don't know exactly what the procedures are in that respect. He did mention something, which is the security clearance of Pierre Poilievre, which, again, I think, he mentioned it, but it's not really going to stick, so it was just sort of another thing to try to make it seem as if he was differentiating himself from Pierre Poilievre. Mark Carney's trying to make himself seen, and I think for a good reason, I would say, because that's sort of how he's always portrayed himself. He's trying to portray himself as the elder statesman. That's what he's trying to portray himself as, which, in fairness, makes sense because he has had many roles. With that being said, I think security clearance and that kind of argument is kind of weak against Pierre Poilievre. But then again, you look at the other perspective, which is that he's winning by a lot in the polls. So I do think he should have dealt with it better in terms of the questioning. Stephanie Levitz, he didn't really get testy with her, so I don't know what Brian Lilley is really referring to there. He didn't really get testy, so again, I'm unsure what he's referring to there. And then lecturing Rosemary Barton, he just said, look inside yourself. That's not really lecturing. I'm not sure. But he did, in fact, say that, your line of questioning had some ill will or something like that, which, again, I think that is, I wouldn't say completely inappropriate, but I think it's wrong that he's doing that in a moment where he needs to be portrayed as the guy who takes the upper road and does not, stoop that low and starts questioning reporters' integrity and whatnot. So I do think there were valid questions. I think Rosemary Barton had a valid question. Stephanie Levitz had a valid question, and he didn't deal with it incredibly, but I don't think it's the end of the world, really. I don't think Canadians are going to look at this clip and be like, yeah, I'm not voting for Mark Carney just because two reporters asked him about his conflict of interest, and then he didn't respond to it as they wanted to. So that's sort of where I lie on that. Other thing we want to talk about was this. So Donald Trump, in his interview, as mentioned, I know I already showed that clip, but I want to dive a bit deeper into it. He said the conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. So I want to explore this one really quickly. He's no friend of his. So the argument again is being made, Mark Carney he wants Mark Carney to win because he would have a better chance of getting what he wants from Canada. I don't really know if that's true. And based on every indication we've seen, Mark Carney has been very strong in his stance against Trump. So the argument that he would pretty much give Trump anything is sort of null, and it's not really effective. So again, another argument that I think could be restructured from the conservatives and from their part. Betting markets, I don't love looking at the betting markets. Obviously, I've said that many times before on the channel, but Mark Carney is the favorite by about 7% to become the next Prime Minister of Canada. After the election, by the way, that is. So for a very long time, Pierre Poilievre was leading, and then for the first time, Mark Carney is now winning. And last thing I want to show was this. So this is the Liberal Party that released an ad / image, I guess. So this is kind of cheesy. I don't think this is really a good ad or whatever they want to portray with this. So like the Google thing where you just click the pictures, it says click the crossroads or whatever. That's sort of what they did with this. Select all squares with a strong leader, and then they show pictures of Pierre Poilievre and they show pictures of Mark Carney. Again, I don't know what the point of this was, but kind of a funny one that I found. It's kind of childish, but yeah, I just wanted to show it because I thought it was funny. Now, for my closing thoughts, just to end off with this, I know Dan Freeman made a video responding to my challenge, and so Dan Freeman did accept my debate, guys, so it's going to happen sometime soon. I checked some of his comments. There's this one guy that commented. He said, who? Like saying, who am I? I have actually a string of emails with this individual. So David Edwards, if you're watching this, I don't know who he is right now. I guess he doesn't watch my channel anymore. But he did email me a few months ago. So I know that he knows who I am. So again, I'm just saying that really quickly. And then in terms of debate, we'll probably have just us two. It'll be probably maximum 30 minutes. We're going to debate a lot of topics. So I do want you guys to let me know in the comment section if there are any specific topics or questions that you guys want us to answer. Because again, this is a friendly debate. You know, I know Dan Freeman did point out some things that at times I did perhaps clickbait. And I do think that's a valid point. I've been trying to do a better job of doing that and not clickbaiting. So thanks, Dan, for bringing that to my attention, because I have been trying to do a better job. So I do appreciate him actually calling me out on that, because I think it's only right for us to be in a setting, in an environment where everybody can call out each other without feeling offended, without it being personal, so that we can do a better job as, I would say, we are journalists in some respects, because this is new media. So yeah, please let me know in the comment section if there are any questions that you guys want us to talk about. Again, guys, this is the end of Pierre Poilievre. It's a disaster situation. I think we're soon going to have to start talking about what's going to happen with the Conservative Party leadership. That's what we're going to have to start talking about soon, because it's not looking good. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.